Most of us, especially folks in the healing world and sensitives and empaths, there's this invitation to also step out into the light and be seen and take up that space. You deserve to grow in this world. And so to me, the invitation really is, what makes you feel free? Not safe, not, relieved, because sometimes the scared parts of us and the traumatized parts of us are like, I would much rather be smaller because that makes me feel safe. But does that make you feel free,
You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. Hello, Wild One. Welcome back to Feed Your Wild. I'm your host, Vanessa Rodriguez, your intuitive nourishment guide today. And I just have to say, I'm coming off an amazing call that I just had with my group, the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. I'm feeling lit up for this interview that we have with Asia Suler, and I am just so profoundly humbled by the incredible folks that have stepped in. If you missed it in previous episodes, I'd mentioned that I had applications open for my new 6-month mentorship program and practitioner mastermind called the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway, where we help healers and helpers who are ready to step out of the spiritual closet, expand your intuitive gifts, and go from struggling empath or conventional practitioner or newbie on this path to new earth intuitive healer. While we close the doors for this cohort, you can still get on the wait list so that you are the first to know when we open back up. Simply go to wildlyrooted.com/apply and fill out the info there so that we can stay connected and send you the details once the doors have opened back up. And I have another brief announcement that I want to make sure that I drop because doors are going to close very soon on this amazing opportunity. So in the past couple of episodes, I have talked about my friend Ashley Burnett's program called Unleash Your Impact. And we had a phenomenal interview with Ashley in a previous episode. She has a 3-part workshop series that is still live if you are able to check it out, and it's totally free. The workshops include one that's on unleashing your time freedom, reclaiming hours of your precious time, making more money, and infusing more joy into your heart-driven business. There's another Unleashing Your Signature group program for those who are really interested in becoming a wildly impactful leader, scaling your business through transformational group work, events, and retreats. And her final workshop, which was Unleash Your 100K plus business without a huge list. And I know the numbers thing can ruffle some feathers for some folks. I know that in the past it has for me, but here's the truth. Ashley is all about doing this in a way that is fully aligned with your purpose, your work with a capital W in this world, doing it in an authentic, honest, ethical way, and cultivating a devoted community that is supportive of each other and servicing the world. She drops so many key gems in these 3 workshops. They are available still for free, and you can find the replay using the links that I have, wildlyrooted.com/unleash. And of course, you can find those links in the show notes. And she has her group program that is open right now. Doors are open. Unleash Your Impact. It's a 6-week online training for heart-driven women in business who are really ready to expand their impact and, of course, their income by leading transformational and experiential group programs, retreats, workshops, and or events. And this can be virtual and in person. I know that there's a lot of folks listening to the podcast that are either in the service industry or you're a provider, a practitioner, a coach, like this is really for you. If you're a coach, yoga teacher, therapist, acupuncturist, astrologist, meditation teacher, some sort of heart-centered holistic practitioner, or you are a creative in some way and have a creative business, this course is also for you. I myself have done one of the OG versions of Unleash Your Impact. It helped me to launch my group programs, my retreats, and I've never looked back. It's been an incredible experience, and Ashley has added so much more since I did this program years ago. And so I'm really excited for anybody who's interested in this type of work to check it out. And if it's not aligned for you to step into the full program just yet, definitely check out these free workshops. There's no reason not to, and they're available for this limited time only. And so I just wanted to mention some tangible results and benefits that you can get from joining this program, because I know that we can talk about this stuff. It's airy-fairy, and we really want to ground it and root it into some practical and mundane in the best possible way language. So the first is clarity around your offering, your signature group offering, what that looks like, and how each one really feeds and works into the ecosystem of your business, and how to articulate that value and the benefits of those offerings to your community. Really building the confidence to not only support and step into that leadership role, but really to also maybe raise your rates or price your programs according to the value that you offer. And that's something that I see that's so common, is people really devaluing the value of what it is that they're offering. And believe me, I get it. And I'm all about offering many different options and accessibility and helping support our communities. We also want to make sure that we're not devaluing ourselves in the process. Ashley also goes into aligned marketing and how to build funnels. So a launch plan that'll help support you in your group work, filling them up and making more money in that way. And also the very critical energetic hygiene practices that are going to help you to create that sustainability and support and protection so that you don't burn out. Of course, she goes through advanced space holding skills to create that close-knit community so that not only are they feeling deeply supported, but they also come back for more. And within this program, you will get connected with a community of supportive change makers that are really going to stretch you out of your comfort zone and hold you accountable to launching your offerings with success. And you know, I am all about community and the power of community. It is incredible, and there's nothing like it. This program is only offered once a year, and I am a guest mentor, which is what I'm all about it. And I'm sharing it out because I really do feel so deeply that this program can help out so many people that are out there, just to not only have the logistical elements and the know-how behind creating, cultivating group programs, offerings of the like, but Ashley provides really the behind the scenes of a full-on business, right? So building the ecosystem of a business. So while her focus is really on the group work, you're going to get so much more beyond that. And there's so many other brilliant guest mentors that she has brought in as teachers within this program. I myself, I'm teaching on feeding and unleashing your wild voice. So we're going to go deeply into that on many different layers, what that means, and really connecting to our authentic inner wild voice and stepping out as a leader and expressing our gifts through our voice, our writing, our marketing, and how to support and sustain ourselves on a body, mind, and spirit level in doing so. You can find more information on that using my link, wildlyrooted.com/unleash your impact. Again, links are in the show notes. And if you have any questions at all, you can definitely reach out to me. I'm over on Instagram at wildlyrooted, or feel free to send us an email, hello@wildlyrooted.com. I'd be happy to answer your questions. But of course, you can also reach out to Ashley's team. They're phenomenal. She has an amazing FAQ on the website, but also her team is just really, really great. And they will support you in making the most aligned decision for yourself. All right, so let's get into the details of this conversation. In today's episode, we are conversing with the so effervescent and eloquent Asia Suler. We had Asia on the podcast previously talking about intuitive plant medicine. I will make sure to link that up so that you can hear more about her backstory. Today, we are talking about her new book, which is amazing. Her first book, Mirrors in the Earth, Reflections on Self-Healing from the Living World. For those who are not familiar with Asia, Asia's a writer, teacher, herbalist, and earth intuitive who lives in the folds of the Blue Ridge Mountains. She's the founder of One Willow Apothecaries, an Appalachian-grown company that offers handcrafted herbal medicines and educational experiences in herbalism, animism, ancestral healing, and earth-centered personal growth. She's guided over 20,000 students in 70-plus countries through her immersive online programs. I highly recommend them, as well as her writings and teachings. And through her work, Asia helps people embrace their own unique medicine through a joyful engagement with the natural world. This book is filled with poetic nature writings. It's really sensual in the way that it brings you there right next to her in the experience and guides us into a self-discovery process, a tending process that honors the inherent brilliance and the medicine that lives within each of us. I think her book, as her publishers describe, is a nature therapy session for the soul. I must agree, and I know that you will not be disappointed. In our chat, we talk about Asia's birthing process, both having just birthed her baby and birthing her book in the same season. How on earth she was able to do that. We take a journey into her book and discuss the many lessons that she describes in the book as it also applies to her own life right now in this next chapter. We touch on boundaries and boundary keeping, the expansion of time when we have really beautiful boundaries, clear priorities, and a set focus. Asia talks about the potency behind smallness and the reframing that we're invited into around bigness and smallness and all the ways that we might be coaxed by external factors and society to show up big, but how our smallness can actually be the gift that is needed for oneself and for the world. We talk about the medicine of flower essences and the beautiful ephemerals and first wild blooms that teach us the power of small mightiness and freedom. Asia also touches on the gift of Marcescens and how this phenomenon from our tree relatives gives us a template and maybe even permission to release and grow in our own unique timelines. Asia gives us a beautiful exercise for discerning what really is our true size, so to speak. How we know whether we are actually playing small to the detriment of ourselves and others and staying hidden versus feeling the pressure to be bigger and more than what we truly need to be. Asia also shares a few of her favorite flower essences that she's currently working with, and one that she sees supporting folks who are ready yet maybe a bit apprehensive or fearful of stepping out into the world in a bigger way, in a more expanded way. We also talk about voice, how Asia has cultivated her own voice and her process of sharing it. As a writer and wordsmith, Asia shares some of the ways that she continues to practice sharing her voice. Asia gives us a small peek into her life and her personal practices, the ones that have been most supportive for her in this new chapter of her life, as mother of a new baby and a new book. And she gets honest about how birthing her baby and herself as mother has textured and layered her own song thus far. Asia always brings such beautiful perspective and words that truly hit home for so many folks that identify as highly empathic, highly sensitive, and on the path of intuitive healing. I honestly love her book, and I know that it's going to be so supportive for those that are ready or have been on a healing journey, as she illuminates the mundane and not so mundane healing powers of the living earth that truly give us permission to be who we are, to cultivate deep self-compassion and connection in communion with the natural forces for personal and ecological healing. We'd love to hear from you. If you have read or are reading Mirrors in the Earth, let us know. Reach out to us on social media. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and continued conversation related to this interview and podcast. You can always find me over on Instagram at Wildly Rooted is my handle, and wildlyrooted.com is my website. All links are in the show notes. We'd love to connect. All right, with that, let's dive in with Asia Suler. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Feed Your Wild podcast. Today, I'm just so pleased as punch to have Asia Suler back on the podcast. Asia just wrote a book we're going to get into, all the things, and deep, deep gratitude for you showing up. I know you are super busy and you're a new mama and you have all the things going on. So thank you for coming on the podcast, Asia.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back, Vanessa. I'm really delighted to be here.
I have been really using your book as sort of therapy. I'm going to be honest, for the past month since I received it. And I've been tuning in both the written word, so reading the book, and then I felt this call to get your Audible version. So the audio voice version. I mean, obviously I have this podcast. One of my favorite things and one of my ways of learning is through the spoken word. And I was like, I have to hear it from Asia and her voice. And I gotta tell you, it was a completely different transmission and receiving process. And I highly recommend everybody to do this. So I'm getting ahead of myself. First of all, Asia, let's talk about your book. This is your first book, Mirrors in the Earth, Reflections on Self-Healing from the Living World, available now everywhere where there's books, I'm sure. I'd love to start off with maybe just describing what this book really is about and how it was seeded. You know, where were the first seeds of this book for you? I'm sure there's a lot of stories around that.
Yeah, the book is a series of essays that help people connect to the natural world, and specifically to this concept that the natural world is always reflecting back to us our goodness and our belonging, that we are actually designed to be able to see and encounter ourselves through encountering these beings in the living world. And the idea that the earth is actually really invested in us looking into these mirrors in the earth to see and appreciate ourselves, because it's really through learning self-compassion that we are ultimately able to give our gifts to this planet. And so it's always been very comforting for me to remember this, that the earth is not a neutral bystander, that the earth really wants us to go on this journey of self-recognition and self-acceptance, because we are here for a particular reason. We're here to bring an important gift in this evolution and this time of healing on this planet. And when we can come home to ourselves and this place of self-compassion, that's how we access those gifts and ultimately bring them here to this planet during this potent time. So that is what the book is about. And really, I wrote the book because the earth took me on this journey. So each chapter sort of revolves around a core concept or idea in this process of learning how to see oneself, but it also includes a lot of my own personal story, because the book and the earth really took me on this journey in order to write this book.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of, and I know you cite her in her book, but Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, where it's just like speckled with personal story and jewels from more than human natural world and lessons within that. So it was really potent in that way and really beautiful. Just living, I got to paint you a picture. Most of the time when I was reading your book, I was nursing my baby, Santos, and I like to have multiple inputs. And so I was also listening to music. Hermanos Gutierrez, for anybody who's familiar, I'm kind of obsessed with them right now. On a rocking chair and looking out my window at like the wildlife because we're right by a forest. It just was such medicine. And I can feel the journey that you take us on. Also, because I feel like there's so much crossover and shared experiences that you write about that I know speak to the heart of so many people, especially those that are actively, knowingly on a healing path, as well as healers and practitioners, because so many of these folks have come to the place where they're at because of, maybe an arduous path or a lot of challenges. And so those stories of the guidance from the natural world and self-reflection and healing is just like, it strikes a huge chord in my heart, and I know in so many others. I have to ask because it's like you gave birth twice in the same season. You had a baby and you gave birth to this book. So first of all, congratulations on welcoming your little one. Iona, is it right?
Iona, yeah.
So beautiful, such a beautiful name.
Such a journey. I'll say that. Yeah.
I'm like, how does this girl do it? Because honestly, like I only had the capacity to give birth once. So how was that process too? I'm sure this book took longer than the 9 months, I'm assuming, to write. How was that whole process for you?
Yeah, from the time I started working on this book to the time it came out, it was about a 10-year period. So, the first few years, I knew that there was a book that was wanting to move through me, but I didn't understand what the overarching concept was. So that took like several years of me kind of dipping my toes in and out, starting drafts, then kind of letting them go. And I finally had a download moment where I realized how all these stories were fitting together in this concept that the earth was teaching me self-compassion, and that wasn't a selfish pursuit or a side pursuit to my desire to bring my gift to the world, that it was essential to it. And so once I sort of had the glue and the overarching message, then I could really start crafting the book. And that took another handful of years. And then the book was actually complete in 2020. Just the publishing process takes a long time. So it was interesting because the book was completed in 2020. And I also was feeling ready to get pregnant at that time. And I was like, okay, in for a penny, in for a pound, we're just going to go for it and see how the timing works out, because it's so out of my control. And yeah, so I ended up getting pregnant and realizing that I would be having the baby about 5 months before the book came out. And I was grateful that there was at least that time period. And so I worked really hard all while I was pregnant, basically to kind of preload as much work as I could so that, I knew that I would have like a peaceful fourth trimester with her. That was really important to me. And so I really busted it out in pregnancy. And then, yeah, I had like a full 2 months of not working, just me and her. And then after about 2 months, actually, I had to go back and work again to get ready for the book to launch. And the biggest thing I had to do was record the audiobook. And so I'm glad you mentioned it because it was really important to me that I be able to do that. I was really excited that the publishing company was down for me to record it in my voice. And yeah, it was just something that felt really important to me. My writing process, it's very oral. So I read what I write out loud. So I can't tell you how many times I've read that book out loud, many times at this point. And so it felt really important that I get to read it out loud because in some ways that's how I primarily experience the book. And so it was interesting because we went to a recording studio here in town. And, at the time she was only, I think not even quite 2 months old. thank God for green rooms. That's all I'm going to say. Because, my partner, John, and her were just like in the green room, and I would go record. And then, like, every hour and a half, like, take a break and go nurse her. And she did her naps in there. And it's been all the things. But I think, like, the birth of anything, like, I see why people compare the birth of a book to the birth of a baby, because it is this experience where it's something it's something you've really been wanting and working towards and waiting for a long time. And then it happens, and there's so much that you can't anticipate. There's so much joy, and there's also so much tenderness and vulnerability, and this feeling of a whole new era of your life unfolding, an era that you don't really know what it contains, but you know that now there's this creation in the world that is part of you, but also not you at this point. And so it's been fascinating to watch these two births unfold in my life and sort of come to this place of realizing, like, wow, these two babies are really initiating me into a whole new era of my existence. And yeah, I'm just curious what that will look like. And right now I'm just living it and kind of watching it unfold from this observer stance with just a lot of wonder.
Yeah, talk about like double initiation. I was thinking the same, and just so much I think of what you talk about in your book and really spiraling up into like the next level and version, because I know that through my own experience, one of the things that's most important in this work when you bring in a new child or being is boundaries, right? And so much like self-respect and self-knowing that's required to really uphold a supportive and safe and brave container for yourself, for your family, and for the work that you are continuing to put out into the world. And you talk a lot about gardening and boundaries, which I love. I'm curious how, like, these lessons, whether it's boundaries or some other lessons, are coming up for you again in sort of like a new season of your life.
This is such a good question because it's so real and vivid becoming a parent and the reality of just how important boundaries are. So I wrote my book in part for people who identify as empaths and highly sensitives, which a lot of people who work in the healing field are. And I find that those who are empaths and sensitive tend to have a hard time with boundaries because we're sort of naturally more porous. And often from a young age, our boundarylessness was like valued and reflected back to us as part of what we're giving, perhaps to our family or our community. And so it can be a slog as an adult to really come back to this place of recognizing that, oh, me holding boundaries isn't me being selfish. It's not, me cutting people out, although sometimes you do need to cut people out, but it's really a life-giving act that gives me the ability to grow, just like we need to weed and prune and cut and cull in the garden in order for a garden to be a garden and not just a wild space, which has a beauty unto itself. But for a garden to be a garden, we need to hold boundaries. The same is true in our lives. And I think as a highly sensitive person becoming a mother, it has really brought home to me just how important this boundary holding is. And, I have to give credit to my wonderful therapist, Shannon O'Neill, who I reference in the book, because before I had a child, she said, what I find for people who are empaths is often when they have a child, it actually opens up a lot more inner space and freedom and creativity, because what happens is you realize where all that caretaking energy was supposed to land the whole time. And that just really struck me. And when I had a child, I was like, oh my gosh, she was completely right. Like all of just that sort of overflowing cup of nurturance and care that empaths and sensitives tend to kind of just like flood out into the world with. And then in a way where then they start to feel depleted. I think the journey of becoming a parent, it's like you have this place where you realize, oh, this is where all that caretaking instinct was really supposed to land. And then anything else that's left over at the end of the day from taking care of myself and my child, that's what I can give. And I really cannot give anything at all until these two people, myself and my child, are nourished. And it also really brings home the reality that you absolutely need to use some of that caretaking energy to take care of yourself. Especially in those early months, it's just so obvious because you're like, if you are the one nurturing and feeding the child and helping them to sleep, I mean, all the things as her mother, it's like I was the home, I was the container, I was the source of nurturance. And I realized I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't like set boundaries with things in my life so that I really have the space to just focus on myself and this child, like I would completely fall apart and literally not be able to take care of her. And so it's such a blessing to become a parent because it makes the need for boundaries very apparent. And to me, in that way, it's been very liberating. I think a lot of people talk about the way in which children really eat up your time and take away your time. And that's true on one level, of course. Like most of my day is devoted to being with her. And yet, the deeper experience for me has been one of expanding time because it has really shown me that when I hold boundaries, and it's something I talk about in the book, that when I hold healing boundaries, healthy boundaries for myself and my growth, there's this interesting, like, psychedelic experience that happens where time itself seems to expand. And all the things that seem to be draining your attention, once they're where they need to be, their proper place within your constellation, then all of a sudden, all this energy and space opens up and all this creativity comes flooding in. And so, even though being a mom is absolutely a full time job, I'm still amazed by this feeling of inner spaciousness and liberation that has come in through being even more clear on what my boundaries are.
Oh my gosh, I could not have put it any better than that. I mean, 1,000%. And I feel like that expansion of time that you're talking about, it's almost like by setting these very clear parameters and then funneling that energy to self, to this container, to home, and to the most important, like really shifting our priorities or at least making our priorities clearer than they ever have been. It's like you automatically go into like quantum or deep time. There's like that travel in. And I myself have been really surprising myself of like how much work I'm actually getting done. That is the important work, where I think I was doing so many things prior to that I just didn't need to do. But there was this story, right? Because it just, as you spoke to, there's the blind spots with some of the boundaries, for me at least, like when it comes to my work. Like I think I've gotten really good with boundaries around, like people and energies and things like that. But when it comes to my own self and my activities, that's kind of a challenge that I still deal with. And that has gotten a lot more clear. And I think also funneling that energy it kind of brings like a special juju to whatever it is that you're putting in, right? It's like spell work almost. And so I imagine that the book is receiving this, and this work through your book. Is there anything else that you feel that's really important in your work today that you're kind of funneling that energy into?
I love that you are having that experience, Vanessa, because I really am too. That realizing all the things that I put a lot of energy and time into that I'm like, oh, I really didn't need to do that, and that things can actually run better even than I realized with me just taking a step back. And I think for me, I always knew when the book came out that it would be like a graduation kind of, especially something that I've worked on for so long and was really on that journey with this book. I think some people write books after they've gotten their PhD in something, and they're like, okay, now I'm the expert in this. And that was not my experience with this book. I was actively learning self-acceptance and self-compassion as I was writing this book. And so I always knew when it came out, there would be this feeling of graduation, like kind of this idea of what comes next. And so I feel like what I've really been prioritizing outside of obviously my family and just the time and space to be present, because time moves so fast when you have a baby. Outside of that, I've really just tried to prioritize tuning in to my inner self and the ways in which I'm evolving and changing and being present for that and being excited about what new creative things might want to arise from me from this evolving state. And I will say that in some ways, having like more structured time, I'll say that more structured time for the things that really matter. First of all, it highlights what really matters to you. And then you don't have quite as much time as you used to do those things, but it makes it more potent. Like, before I had a child, I would meditate every day and would often be doing shamanic journey work several times a week. And that is not happening in the same way right now. We're starting to get in a little more of a routine. She's starting to be able to nap better, all the things. But, the times that I have had to drop into meditation or journey work, I'm like blown away by how vivid it is and how much I'm receiving. Kind of reminds me a little bit. There's a chapter in the book called Drop Dosages. And it's about really like the power of the small and valuing these small shifts, these small moments we have in life and just how potent they really are. I think we're often used to like this idea that we need a lot of anything in order to make a big difference. You need like a lot, you need to take a lot of herbs in order to heal. When the reality is that sometimes just taking a few drops of a flower essence can change your whole day. And I think becoming a mom, it's like my world is kind of now being given out in drop dosages in terms of the time I have to do things. But it's been so potent and so healing to remember that, oh my gosh, yes, like I can have a really powerful, like altering, expansive experience in like half an hour, but it's half an hour where I'm completely present and so grateful for the time. So that aspect of it, it's been an amazing upgrade in some ways to my spiritual journey. I think that's like the thing I'm most excited about right now is just being present with sort of these new gifts that are opening through this experience.
That was such a beautiful chapter. And I love the way that you speak into bigness versus smallness and just sort of like the ways that we can look at that and contextualize it within our own experience and lives. We've been having a lot of conversations on this podcast around, quote, playing small versus allowing oneself to expand into your actual size, which might be bigger than one is comfortable with or has like, there's might be stories around that. And I hear people, usually when we have these podcasts, I just hear the questions as we're going through, right? I hear people asking, how can we discern like what is healthy in terms of the way that we show up, our true size? How do we know if we're keeping ourselves small or if that smallness is actually the goodness that we need to experience, or hidden versus putting ourselves into a position that is actually supportive for us? Like we don't need to be fully seen. And I think when we're in these spaces, like you and I, and sort of this postpartum period, which I know a lot of parents out there, like in postpartum never really ends, right? What are some things that come up for you around these questions of like discernment and navigating one's bigness and smallness? Or any thoughts coming to you on that?
I would say to people to really drop into their lived felt experience inside their body and ask themselves, what makes you feel free? What makes you feel expansive? It can feel very expansive to allow yourself to take time away, to feel small upon the earth, to feel small in a way that you feel like you can be held by powers greater than yourself. Like you don't need to do anything big to be loved and valued and appreciated and celebrated. I think there's this misnomer that being small means being insignificant. And, meanwhile, the term that we have for the biggest leap you can make in your consciousness is a quantum leap, which quantums are tiny. That is a tiny, teeny little shift that when this quantum leap happens, it changes the whole nature of the atom. And so this is the power of the small. And so that in that chapter in particular, it's kind of a clarion call to like give yourself permission to not need to feel like your worth is dependent on how much you accomplish, how big your social media following is, how much you get done. And yet, I completely agree with you that most of us, especially folks in the healing world and sensitives and empaths, there's this invitation to also step out into the light and be seen and take up that space, right? Because like you deserve to grow in this world. And so to me, the invitation really is what makes you feel free, not safe, not relieved, because sometimes the scared parts of us and the traumatized parts of us are like, I would much rather be smaller because that makes me feel safe. But does that make you feel free? And I think that freedom piece, that will always lead us in the right direction. Like I remember hearing once hearing someone describe these higher powers of existence And the reality that actually, in sort of, if we were to rate it hierarchically, it was like love is at a certain frequency and freedom's at an even higher frequency. And I thought that was really an interesting concept. I think in reality, love and freedom are the same thing. And just the other day in a journey, that was something that was given to me, is this concept that truth, freedom, and love are all the same thing. And so when you're living in your truth, you are going to be feeling like love is channeling through you and you're going to feel free. So I really try to navigate my life based on that sense of inner freedom. And when I can really tune into the somatic experience of that. So asking yourself, like, what does freedom feel like in my body? Because it's sort of training yourself to recognize what true freedom is versus what the media feeds us as freedom, what we grew up being told was true freedom versus the experience in our body of what freedom feels like. So for me, it feels like my chest being really open and almost like this feeling like wings are moving off my arms. Like I can sort of feel these like whoosh of energy move off my arms. And so I would ask those who are listening to just really tune into the somatic experience of their body, their lived, felt experience, and ask themselves, what does freedom look like and feel like inside of my body? And then when it comes to this conversation of big and small, ultimately, those are just words to describe energy states that we're moving in and which energy state is truly freeing for you at this time. And whatever it is that we're choosing in our full empowerment is what is going to be the thing that helps us feel free.
I love that you brought up freedom. I've been doing regular Akashic record channeling for the podcast, so sort of like collective intuitive channelings. Freedom has come up so often. And it's very textured and layered. There's lots there. But in the context of our conversation, you know, what comes to mind as you were talking about the flower essences and the wildflowers, you talk in probably my favorite chapter of your book, Vernal Springs. You talk about the medicine and the teachings of the ephemerals outside and within us and those first wild blooms. And it makes me, as I was reading that, remember the first time, because I'm originally from Chicago, and the first time that I really kind of connected in with those wild blooms is when I moved to Southern Oregon. And so like pedicularis, shooting star, the fawn lilies, and how I feel like they encapsulate everything that we're talking about, this smallness that is so potent and big medicine and can make these quantum shifts. I'm curious if you have any flower essences, either that you're working with right now or that you would maybe recommend to somebody that we're speaking to right now that is really thinking about or journeying with this bigness versus smallness.
Well, two flower essences that I'm working with currently that have been really potent for me are passion flower and tulsi. And passion flower essence, it's one of my absolute favorites. Both of them are. They're like soul plants for me. But passion flower, I adore because one of the things that I've found with passion flower is it really helps people open up to like, what is that passionate calling for you? You know, what is that like destiny that is asking for you to step out onto? And sometimes that question of big versus small is really the question of where do I need to be in order to encounter my destiny and to really follow the call of what's in my heart? And so I love passion flower essence for that. And tulsi is just one of my all-time favorite plants, and it's a holy basil from India, and it's sort of a panacea of all different kinds of medicines on a physical level. On a spiritual level, I find tulsi really helps us see the abundance that exists within the realm of spirit and our spiritual lives. So if you start to feel like there's a lack of abundance or that you have to do things just right or that there's a certain way you need to go about connecting into your wider self or your higher knowing in order to get it just right, then tulsi will kind of remind you that like literally everything is made of this energy and there is a complete abundance, that there's an ease and an invitation. You don't have to be an expert, and it will really kind of like initiate this next new spiritual phase in your life. And so those are two that I'm working with currently right now. So I just have to give a shout out to those. But I do personally find that the early spring wildflowers, like you mentioned, the ephemerals, are so good at helping people step into new eras of their life. So one that I think is across the board super helpful is crocus. And most people are really familiar with this ephemeral. So in the book, I talk about woodland ephemerals. But there are ephemerals that are in most people's gardens in the temperate world. And these are the ephemerals like daffodils, hyacinths, crocuses. And these ephemerals, they hold that medicine of being brave enough to bloom at the very beginning, right? So these flowers bloom when most pollinators aren't even out and about. They bloom when there's still chance of freezing weather and snowstorms. And so there's a whole lot of bravery that it takes to put yourself out there and bloom at that time. And crocus is one of the first ones. Crocus has this diminutive presence. Normally, they're sort of flat against the earth and in these shades of lilac and purple and yellow. And yet they just completely break your heart wide open because for many of us, it's the first flower we've seen in months. And crocus sort of carries this energy of opening up after a long, hard slog. So it's like this feeling if you've been going through a hard time in your life, or you feel like you've just been moving through trial after trial and you're kind of ready for this new era, crocus helps us initiate that new era and step into it and say, okay, yes, like this really is the dawning of a new time. And to value the sense of our own vulnerability and tenderness, and that it's okay to step into these new eras and feel vulnerable and not be sure, not step in with bravado and 100% certainty that it's going to work out, right? Because when it's really truly a new beginning and a new era, you never feel that way. You always have this feeling of just like vulnerability and yeah, like this tender hope for what might be there. And so I love working with crocus for that. And I think it really dovetails well with this conversation of the small being the mighty and the valuing of the small or just budding parts of ourselves as the way that we step into our bigness.
Oh, I love it so much. Yes. And I'm feeling so many people are just receiving this because that medicine, like at least so many folks that I've been talking to, especially those on the healing path and looking to bring their gifts out, there's so much in terms of fear, shame of being seen, imposter syndrome, which you talk about in your book. And I think almost giving that permission to feel the trepidation or to feel that fear and that vulnerability and that that's okay, I think gives even more fuel to step out. So thank you for speaking into that. And another piece along with that you talk about in your book is doing it in your own timeline and in your own season and rhythm. And you talk about the gift of Marcescens. Would you be able to touch on that a little bit also? Because I think it weaves in perfectly here.
Marcescens is a fascinating ecological process that scientists don't really understand, but it's basically the process where a deciduous tree will hold on to its leaves throughout the winter. So if you've ever seen a beech tree, for example, that has sort of the fawn-colored curls of its old leaves that hang on all winter long until the spring. So that is called Marcescens. And scientists aren't sure why deciduous trees do this. There's got to be an ecological adaptation to it because it's something that evolved and has stuck around for millions of years. It's something we can see in oaks and beeches, tulip poplars. So there's a very real reason for this. And I think on a poetic level, there's a really important message for us as humans. This message that there is always the invitation to be on your own timeline, that there's no one season in which you're supposed to bloom or release or compost something, that each have our own individual timelines. And actually, that's what makes like a beautifully planned garden so exquisite, is that all these flowers flower at different times, right? If everything flowered all at once, it would be a cacophony for sure, but then it would be really quiet. So each have our own timeline. We're meant to bloom at a specific time, and that's going to look different often than what our culture is handing us as to what the timeline or the schedule looks like. And I think Marcescens really highlights one part of that, which is that it's okay to be on your own timeline, especially when it comes to letting go. There's things that we hold on to past fall through the winter of our lives, that there's a reason why we're holding on to it and still processing it. That it doesn't mean that we're not evolved or that we're somehow behind. It just means that it's a really big thing that we are processing and integrating, and that our spirit is needing a certain amount of time to be able to do this work. And what's beautiful about Marcescens and just so poetic is even though these trees hold on to their dead leaves all throughout the wintertime, it never prevents the new sprouts from coming. So there's a beach by my house, and every year I sort of wait every day of early spring and watch to see when are these leaves going to fall off because I start to see the buds swell. The new leaves are almost here, and then it's almost like one day, all of a sudden, I go out to the tree and almost old leaves are gone and the new ones are just coming out. And so, in this way, Marcescens helps us to know that when it's time for spring, spring always comes in our lives. You don't need to worry about that. Your spirit, your life force is irrepressible. Spring will always arrive when that timing is right. And so, for wherever you are at, and for now, to just be gentle with yourself about where you're at on that journey of letting go, of learning how to bloom, of stepping into the different seasons of your life, because wherever you are in those seasons is important. It's sacred. It serves a function in your life. And I believe a function in the overall healing and ecology of our world.
I love that you touch on this communion with trees and so much medicine that you have personally received and that we can all connect in with. One of the trees, when you're talking about, that's coming to mind for me is the madrone tree, which I did not know of until I moved to Southern Oregon. And madrone, it's more of a broadleaf evergreen, but it's always in a constant process of dropping leaves in all seasons and also shedding its bark skin. And on the inside, like under the bark, as it's shedding, it looks like peels of, for those who are not familiar with madrone, when you shave a pencil, it's like pencil shavings, and there's this smooth trunk underneath it, and it's very sensual and it's very evocative, but at the same time, it has reminded me that there's this constant process of shedding and new growth, and it's on its own timeline. And so that's one tree that I have definitely connected with. I would invite everybody to maybe connect in with whatever a tree is calling you, because I think there's not just the tree medicine as like a general umbrella, but as you're touching on, there's so many different lessons and beautiful messages that we can receive from the various trees as well. But yeah, I love that you weave all of that in your book. So thank you for expressing the gifts of Marcescens. And one of the things that also comes to mind with all of this and your process, as we're talking about your personal story, is the cultivation and sharing of one's voice. And voice is medicine, even. This has also been a theme on the podcast. And I know that this is something that a lot of folks have at least messaged me about having challenges around. So, of course, Asia, I feel like you have such a beautiful voice, both orally, like the way that you speak, and also the beauty that's woven through your words, your word weaving with your book and just with your work in general. How were you able to, for yourself, that you can look back and see, really cultivate what you feel like is your voice? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that and they feel like they don't have a voice per se.
I think for me, a lot of it was just persistence with continuing to show up on the page and doing a lot of writing just for myself. I've always loved writing ever since I was very little. And prior to starting my business in my mid-20s, my major form of expression was poetry. There's something about poetry that is sort of this undiluted encounter with the self. So it's something I encourage folks to do who are really wanting to tune into their voice is actually, maybe give themselves permission to step out of some forms that might feel like a little bit more rigid. Like sometimes, for example, I coach a lot of people who are starting businesses. And for example, like the newsletter can feel like, oh gosh, I have to write this newsletter. I have to sound a certain way. What is my voice with this? And to sort of step out of those forms, with the newsletter or the Instagram post or whatever, and just write a poem for you, not for anybody else, just for you, and have the intention of that poem to try and capture a feeling, whatever it is you're feeling that day, or maybe something you're really trying to process, and set the intention that this is just an encounter with yourself to understand and process your own feelings and inner landscape. I've really found through sort of unshackling myself in that way and just writing in my journal in ways I won't ever share, it really helps me see what is my voice? And often our voices are much deeper and more diverse than we realize. There's a lot to them. Ultimately, I think when you've found your voice because it feels deeply fulfilling and affirming and healing to not only write in that voice, but to read it. So, I kind of consider writing poetry in that way, like a form of channeling, to just sit down, give yourself a time frame and just let it flow out. And then what you're channeling is your voice, this deeper self or wider self. And then if you read it back to yourself and it really is that authentic inner voice, then it's going to feel good. Even if there's a part of your brain that's like, I would use a different word there, or that sentence wasn't so expertly crafted, the larger part of you will just feel comforted and seen by the familiarity of that voice. And so I really think practice just helps you hone that voice and whatever it is that voice is wanting to be now, right? Because we are diverse, multitudinous people. And so as you change and evolve, your voice will also change and evolve. And that's a good thing. So it's not about figuring out the voice of who you were 10 years ago or who you're going to be 10 years from now. It's really just speaking in the voice that is existent within yourself at this moment in time. And everybody has the ability to do this. And I think just the experience of connecting in with that voice is just so profoundly healing, because when we are in that voice, not only is what we're saying something that's really going to land with other people, because we can feel it when someone's in their voice versus not. It really lands with the people that you want to be connecting with when you're writing in your own voice, but it also lands for you. Expressing yourself and working your way towards your truth through your own voice, whether you're speaking or writing, it lands in a way that it's not going to land when you're reading anybody else or when you're writing in a way that is mimicking somebody else. It will land. So that's another way you can really know that you're writing in your own voice, is that it really resonates for you. So those are a few tips that I have found to be helpful. And I just think this earth is so hungry for our voices. Like each person has such a unique, special, profound transmission that they're here to bring to this planet through their voice. And so I really believe that the earth is incredibly supportive in this capacity, that this planet and the beings of the living world want to help support you in finding that voice, because that voice is a part of the chorus and it's a part of the song that's supposed to be sung right now. And so if you ever get stuck, to just go outside and, like you mentioned, Vanessa, like sit with a tree. Be with a tree and just ask to be returned to yourself and to this original voice. And I guarantee you, nature will always help you to do that.
Yeah, and you speak into these songs that we have within, and that's been something that's been coming up a lot. You mentioned having a song burning to sing, but no one to hear it. One of the messages that I've received in the records for the collective recently was, let your song be sung from the depths of your bones, for it is a song unsung that is the greatest of all tragedies, which really had me thinking much more deeply about that. And it reminds me, and I have you to thank for introducing me to Sarah Thomas. I found her through your work. And they said quartz holds the memory of our song. I had Sarah on the podcast speaking into that, and that also deeply resonated with me. And so this theme of songs and bird songs has me, I have so many questions swirling, but one of the things that is coming up, at least right now, as it comes to your personal story too, is how this time in your life, this season, birthing your baby and your book and yourself as mother, how have these experiences shifted or added, layered into your song thus far?
I think having these two big creations appear in the world has really, for me, helped me ground in the awareness of myself as a creator. I think for a long time, I doubted, myself as an artist in that way, as someone who was here to create from like the depths of my heart, not create to build something or to make a living, which is important too, right? But to create a just pure self-expression as something that's valuable, as something that obviously brings me joy, but also really brings something beautiful to the world. And so I'm really excited about exploring myself as creator and myself as artist in that way in the next phase of my life, and starting to see how being brave enough to put this book out there in the world and becoming a mother and just having that beautiful creation take form. I'm excited to see in what ways unshackling myself from this self-doubt that somehow I'm not good enough to be a writer or an artist or creator, or that what I have to say isn't valuable. When I unshackle myself from that, I'm fascinated to see what might come through. There's something about giving birth physically that you're like, oh, well, once I have done that, I can do anything. You're like, if I
Totally.
did that, like, yeah, I can do all these other things. And so I think there's a bravery and an inner belief in me now where I'm kind of excited to see where this wave of creativity and self belief will take me. And I think kids, I'm still early on in the parenthood journey, but kids are just so wildly creative and artistic. Naturally, they haven't received any programming yet that somehow there's like a right or a wrong way to be creative or to be an artist. And so they just are naturally in that state all the time. So I'm excited for just the inspiration that to be a mother and to see Iona just start to co-create with the world and express herself in that way. And I have a feeling it's going to give me just even further inspiration and permission to be like, I'm only here for a short time. And there's a lot that I want to experience about, myself and my life through creation, through artistry. And so, yeah, I'm fascinated to see what that will look like. But I just think, oh man, if we all gave ourselves permission to just create without judgment, what an amazing place this world would be. Like, we are just such powerful creators, and the works of art, whether that is a book or a business or a literal painting or a meal you're going to make, the works of art that want to move through you they're life changing, they're world changing. And so if I could encourage anyone with anything, it would just be really allow themselves that journey of letting that creation move through them, because these creations really are here to change the world.
Well, you give ample invitations through your lovely practices and exercises that you end each chapter with for folks to go deeper with that and that inner and self-exploration. You mentioned some practices like shamanic journeying that you do. Has there been a primary practice that you yourself are engaging with lately that's been supportive for this new chapter of your life? Or if it's the shamanic journeying, would you be comfortable to share what that looks like?
Yeah. So prior to having a child, I had like a lot of rich practices going on in my life. I really liked to work in the Akashic records too, as you mentioned, and doing shamanic journey work, doing rituals outside to connect to nature spirits. And I have more limited time these days. So for me, some of the most powerful things that I've been doing, powerful practices, are to do small rituals outside with journeys that are grounded in the natural world. Like, I'm feeling very called to working with the natural gateways that are in nature. If I'm lucky, I get like one time a week I can do this. And so what that looks like for me is I have a small altar outside, and I will bring a gift to that altar. So whether it's a flower that just bloomed that day, or water or honey from my pantry, but I bring a gift to the altar, and I normally sweep it and clean it up from the previous week or whenever it was I got a chance to be out there previously. I go through a process of what I call like land blessing. And I have a recent video up on my blog if anyone's interested in this, about how to work with land spirits, but it's really pretty simple. I normally go and I acknowledge the four directions and the earth and the sky, and then I just start listing all of the beings that are here on the land, this land where I live and that holds me and my daughter and has welcomed us into the family here. So I list plant species that I know and mushrooms, and I acknowledge the stones and the creek and the unseen beings, the fairies, the elementals, the devas, also the ancestors of that land. And it's like healing to move through that litany. It almost reminds me of saying the rosary. It's healing to name the beings who you're sharing space with and to just give gratitude, to thank them for their presence on that land. And then, normally at the end of that beautiful litany of giving gratitude, if I feel like I have the time and the spaciousness, I will do a short journey. So I pick a gateway in nature. It doesn't have to be physically around me. It could be something in my mind's eye, like a tunnel down into the roots of a tree or riding a rainbow up into the sky, just whatever feels pertinent for me that day. I get very clear and I choose an intention. So what is my question for the day? Or what am I wanting to experience or receive guidance on? And I find that repetitive rhythm is really helpful. So I have a rattle I use sometimes, I have a drum I use other times. You can also just hum or you could slap your thigh. These are all ways to actually help our brain and train to a theta wave state, which is a naturally meditative state where it's just easier to go into experiences like this. Then I close my eyes and I envision myself moving through that gateway. I ask for all the guides on the land there, as well as my personal guides, my spirit guides, my angels, my ancestors, to just hold me as I go into this journey. And then I just see what happens. And it's normally not very long that I'm in a journey, maybe 5, 10 minutes. And I normally receive something. I tend to be very visual, but other people are auditory. So it might feel more of an auditory journey or more like sensation. But just trust whatever it is that you're receiving and the way that you're downloading the answer to whatever this question is. And then I come back and I just write down whatever it is that I received. And I'm always pretty amazed by what comes through, even in just these short sessions. I do find that the more we can focus on setting the scene, creating sacred space and really blessing and giving gratitude to all of the beings that make our lives possible beforehand, the more will come through on these journeys, even when they're very short ones. So that's kind of my grounding practice right now with the small amounts of time that I have. And it's been very enriching.
It sounds very rich and potent, and I'm sure there's so much that you are receiving through that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that it also serves as a beautiful example of how if we feel that we are really pressed for that linear time, that we can still carve out even 5 minutes to do these really deep journeys within ourselves. So thank you for that. Well, I invite everybody to check out your book, not just because you're here and I'm talking to you about it, but because honestly, it's really potent and beautiful. And one of those books that you can just literally use almost as like a divination tool and like put your finger in a section or a chapter and see what medicine is available for you there. I've been working with it in that way too. And yeah, this 3-part Micah lit journey, as you talk about, I am excited for people to dive in. And Asia, before I let you go, I have to ask this question one more time in this season of your life. What do you feel is currently feeding your wild, whether it's body, mind, or soul right now?
So, yeah, one of the things that I would say is really feeding my wild right now is literally just going for walks. I know that sounds so simplistic, but for a while there after the birth, that wasn't something that I could do. I was having to really rest. And so just going for a 20-minute walk outside, I just appreciate it so much. I just appreciate those walks. And I share that because oftentimes we don't feel like we have a ton of time. And I will say that walking has always been a cornerstone of, my ability to tune into my wild. And so some of my wildest, most profound experiences while walking, I had living as a dog walker in New York City. So it doesn't really matter where you are, as long as you're walking, you are encountering the beings in nature and you are literally becoming nature. Like you are a part of the forest. So yeah, that has been super duper helpful for me. I'm trying to think about what else because I'm like, I don't have like a ton of time these days to read and do other things like that. But I will say that I recently read the book Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson. And she has a meditation called, I think she calls it the Heart Voice meditation. And talk about simple and short activities to just like land you right back into yourself and your connection to your inner voice. So that's something I've been practicing and I like really appreciated just that small little example. And it's a really fascinating book. I had like really wild and potent dreams while I was reading that. And on that note too, following my dreams has always been a source of profound connection for me. And I used to write them down every morning and my mornings look a little different these days. But I still find it to be really helpful, even if I just get like 5 minutes at some point in the day to just write down a couple impressions from those dreams, or sometimes just to like, if it's the middle of the night, like just leave myself a little voice memo because there's always so much richness there. And even if I just put a tiny little pin in it, it will help me go back and remember, bring that wisdom into my lived life.
Oh, I love it. These are all so juicy. And that's the second time that book has crossed my path. I have not read it. So I think I'm going to have to get into that one. And for everybody listening, I'll make sure to have all the things in the show notes and links and all that goodness so you can just tap in right away. Well, Asia, thank you so, so much, not just for saying hello and giving us your precious time with us today, but also for your beautiful word weaving and the gifts that you are putting out consistently into the world. It's so needed and appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy to be here with you.
Hey there, I made something for you. One of the biggest challenges that I hear from people is that they are feeling stuck when it comes to their health. You're a smart, capable, and creative change maker, right? And you know what you should be doing for your health. So what gives? Well, it's not about willpower. And I wanted to create something that would help you to unlearn the things that are keeping you stuck so that you can get out of your own way and master the mindset of health. That's why I created Wildly Unstuck, where you'll learn the top 5 things that I have found to sabotage your health goals and what to do about them. You'll learn what it really takes to become committed and unstoppable when it comes to your health goals and find the clarity you've been looking for so you know exactly what to do to get back into alignment. And I made it totally free. So if this is something that you want to dive into and create a vision and soul goals for your health and your life and bring your gifts to the world, because we know that we need it, then I invite you to join us in Wildly Unstuck. You can find that at wildlyrooted.com/unstuck. I'll see you on the other side.